Well, welcome to another Workshop Wednesday. We are continuing our series in inventory. So this is part 2 of inventory. Last week we did part 1, which was just the simple inventory of I buy stuff and I sell stuff. Now today we're going to, super simple. Just I need to track my on-hand quantity and do that in QuickBooks. Today we're going to be talking about something that's a little bit more complex. I buy stuff, I build stuff, and then I sell different stuff. So now we're modifying the stuff that we sell. To Carrie's pleasure, we're not going to be talking about QuickBooks Online because QuickBooks Online doesn't really handle that. Now you can do these things in, inventory management apps and bolt it on to QuickBooks Online. And there are plenty that are out there. The one that I like the most is SOS Inventory. It handles a lot of these things that we're going to be talking about. You can take a look at them and see if they got to stay in QuickBooks Online for whatever reason, and they're managing inventory. There are solutions out there that will handle these things. But
with all these caveats comes another learning curve. You have to trust their support, or you learn it, find a consultant that knows it. There's limitations within SOS. So you need to understand what they are and if they meet your needs. So there's a lot of nuances to inventory that do not come in QBO. Sales orders.
With SOS, it actually does include being able to do sales orders. So you're managing your inventory, you're doing all that stuff in SOS, and then it's just sending the data, financial impact of the data to QuickBooks Online. Doesn't work with desktop. So the nice part about desktop is it's all inclusive.
Have an add-on. Don't worry about the sync. Don't worry about extra training. Well, training, it's still a good idea to have extra training or work with somebody that knows this stuff, because you need to know the nuances. Inventory isn't something you just are born with. You got to learn it, right?
Yeah. There's definitely some things to learn about that.
Yes. It doesn't just magically appear in the computer. I had a customer, actually, it's kind of a funny story. She thought that when we plugged the new computer in, that the inventory would magically hop inside her point of sale software. Just hop in there. Yes, I'm serious. She really thought that it would magically, she thought the computers were that magical. And imagine explaining that. I've had a lot of laughs over that project.
Definitely some surprises. Now Sandy's watching us from Florida. She has a question. Is there a recording on part 1? So yes, there is on our YouTube channel. I'm just pasting that into the comments there. We post all of the prior workshops in our YouTube channel, as well as at schoolofbookkeeping.com. You can go to schoolofbookkeeping.com and look at the Workshop Wednesdays course. They're all free. You don't have to be a subscribing member of School of Bookkeeping. The workshops are all there for you to peruse and review at your leisure, or just check it out on YouTube as well. But yes, that was the first installment. So the next one, just so preview of what's happening next week, is I buy stuff, I manufacture stuff. I need to know exactly where that stuff is at all times. So that we're going to be talking about some of the advanced inventory functionality that some people will need to know when they're managing their books. So so it gets really pretty hairy. It's kind of like the word job costing. When you're talking to construction or contracting clients, you really just want to get an understanding as to what it is what are their needs. What are their gotta haves? What do they need to know? Because when we talk to a customer or potential client that has some inventory needs, well, yeah, QuickBooks Online does handle inventory. But it's as we talked last week, it's not limited. It's just
very
simple.
limited. It's very simple. And yes,
But there are some things that it can do that desktop can't, like categorize your inventory to make it easier to find. You got to do sub items. I mean, there's things that you can do in in both platforms. And I'm not going to argue about, but it is the simple tracking, just like job profitability. I mean, it will track the profit of a job. It will track the on hand quantity of your inventory, but really getting an understanding, sitting down with the potential client or the current client and understanding what it is you need to know and do and track in your QuickBooks, and what is the right product to actually do that. So we're going to just be talking about building stuff. The concept is I purchase raw materials, and somebody at my company is going to do something with those raw materials, turn it into a different product, right?
Yeah.
So there's a couple things that we want to illustrate that QuickBooks Desktop will do. We're just going to be talking about like the premier level of QuickBooks. We're not jumping into enterprise just yet, even though that's Carrie's first place to go. let's put you in enterprise.
Well, it's got the features, so.
Right. It's the buffet of QuickBooks, so you have everything that you can possibly want, in your QuickBooks when you get the top of the line. A Yugo and a Cadillac are both the same. As far as a car is concerned, it'll get you from point A to point B, but obviously the Cadillac has a little bit more under the hood and features, right?
Right. And if it's important, some of these advanced features that are already in the enterprise, then you might as well start using them if they help you. If they don't, start basic.
Right. So what I'm going to look at here, and I'm sorry for the tiny font. Let me see if I can just zoom in.
Oh, you just did something. Hit it one more time.
I know, but it resizes. So
Oh.
Bob, if you're listening, in Easy Cloud, we need to zoom in. So for these for these things. So and I am in Enterprise, but these features are also in Premier. So this is a unit of measure set list. So what we're dealing with here is unit of measure in QuickBooks or in inventory terminology is what does one equal, right? What quantity or what unit is one when you have it on a transaction, whether it be purchase order, sales order, inventory or invoice or sales receipt. What does one mean when I am putting that on the transaction? Because various situations could be that you buy in bulk. Go to Costco, you get 30 rolls of toilet paper, but you use or sell in a smaller quantity, 1 sheet, 2 sheets, whatever.
Right.
So easiest example is beverages, beer, right? It comes in bottles, cans. Those are the individual units, and then 6-packs and cases and kegs, right? But it's all the same thing. It's beer, right? It's a particular brand of beer. So you might buy it in one unit and then sell it in another. So the unit of measure sets allow you to track that and allow QuickBooks to do the math behind the scene. So we just have a simple one here of each, dozen, and case, right? So when you're specifying this unit of measure, the set, you're going to be specifying the base unit. What is QuickBooks going to be using as its base unit? And then your related units are going to be based off of that base, right? So in this case,
start with the smallest.
Yeah, best practice is to start with the smallest. But sometimes the math doesn't work that way, because if you're dealing with length, for example, the smallest unit of measure in the metric system is a millimeter, right? But then if you're actually selling something in a kilometer, that's 1 million times the millimeter. So
Yeah.
sometimes you have to start with a meter, right? Somewhere, someplace in the middle, and then millimeter. You would just say, well, how many millimeters are in a meter? Well, 1,000. So you do, 0.0001, and then kilometers would be 1,000 of that. So sometimes you have to start in the middle, but best case or best practice is to start with the smallest individual unit, and then add on from there, because rounding and there's only 2 decimal points that show up on a lot of transactions. So sometimes you get a rounding issue if you start somewhere in the middle and go smaller with some of your units. But in this case, we have an each, and then a dozen, and a case. So you would just specify what that label is, and then the number of each, how much that is. So obviously a dozen, there's 12, and then a case has 24. And then you also have the ability to specify the default unit. So you can change your default unit for purchase transactions. If you always buy by the case, you can change it to case. If you sell by the each, then you can change it to each or dozen. And then there's also a shipping option as well. So if you have a default unit of measure, so this will help automate the process and allows QuickBooks to make purchasing and ordering with those units of measure a little bit unique. So this is a Premier only feature. So those people using Pro, it doesn't have it. Doesn't have that option, right? So another thing that we want to talk about. Anything you want to add there, Carrie? I know I'm doing most of the talking.
I was going to say that when you're doing things to the inventory like this, which is great to be able to have the ability, and it attaches to each transaction, you just need to keep in mind that it can also cause your file to grow. For Pro Premier have the same file growth, same file limitations. So when you're starting out brand new, it's not usually an issue, but it can happen. It can happen fast once you start flipping these things on, assembly and stuff like that. So,
got it.
And when you froze after I said that, I was like, "Is there something I missed?"
The stunned silence.
I was like, "Well, that was rude."
You know how to clear a Zoom.
I know how to clear a room. That's for sure. That's for sure. Okay, right. So now that we understand multi-unit of measure, I think.
Right.
Next.
So the idea of an assembly is to be able to combine the components of raw materials and allow you to actually combine those when you actually do build the assembly. So this could be, other inventory parts. You can even put non-inventory parts and labor costs and things like that. If you know how much time or how much cost is going to take to build these things, and you want that cost to be transferred over into the cost of the finished good. Now, what it doesn't do very well is track things like waste, right? So, so when you're dealing with raw materials that actually have scrap, the sheet metal or lumber, sawdust goes everywhere. You buy a certain thing of that, but then you have some of it that is discarded, right? It can't be used. In order to track those things like scrap and waste and the manufacturing process of things, there are other workarounds and ways to handle that. But right out of the box, QuickBooks, all it's doing with an assembly is taking those raw components, taking them out of inventory, and moving them and their cost to the finished good when you actually build it. So that's what you'll be specifying here when you enter in the bill of materials. You'll be putting in the individual components that go into one of the finished good. So in this case, it's a interior door kit. So there is a door standard, a wood wood door interior and a hardware brass hinges to make up those components. And then the function inside of QuickBooks to actually move that is called a build assembly. Right, so it looks like a regular transaction, but you would just be specifying the assembly item at the top. QuickBooks is going to list out the components of that assembly that you specified on the item. It's going to show the quantity on hand that you have of those items, give you an idea of what you do have on hand currently with the assembly item, and then down at the bottom, it will tell you how many you can actually build based on the quantity that you have on hand of the raw materials, right? And then you would just specify the quantity to build and build it. Now, another thing you can do is do a pending build. So, maybe you're going to have tell your guys that are actually building these things, they're going to do 50 today. You can do a pending build based off of that. And then when they say, well, we only made 45, you can then record that you've actually only done 45 as opposed to the 50 that they were slacking, didn't build exactly.
Yeah.
Or maybe they were
correct.
Maybe they were go-getters and did 55. Right. But what the idea of the pending build is it will take out those raw materials out of inventory, just like a sales order, so your available quantity. So that way you don't inadvertently, if you're also selling those raw components, you don't inadvertently sell a component that is spoken for, your assembly process. So that's kind of how the assembly item works as far as setting it up, and then the actual building of the assembly. If you don't have Premiere, you end up having to do all sorts of inventory adjustments to reduce the quantity of the raw components, and then increase the finished goods. But they're all considered inventory parts at that point, not the assembly items. So
gives you just more visibility into what you're doing.
Right. And then you have an idea, just like you have a reorder point, as you can specify on individual items, you can specify the reorder point so that you don't fall below, quantity on hand. With inventory assemblies, you have a build point. So like, I don't want to build, I want to have on hand, when it gets to this point on hand, I want to build more. So the inventory assembly or QuickBooks actually can provide you with the insight. It's like, hey, you got X amount of items that are below your build point. You might want to have your guys work on it now these days. So that is, in a nutshell, the second part of inventory, where I buy stuff, I build stuff, and then I sell different stuff with regards to QuickBooks. Carrie, anything else before I get kicked out again?
I was just going to call out that oftentimes we see people that are new to QuickBooks getting mixed up between what a group is and what a assembly is. And so just let's say you are going to put together a gift basket of stuff. You could do it either way, but it's really designed that once a raw material is depleted, that no longer exists and it becomes something brand new. Where a group could just be, I'm tossing all this stuff together in a gift basket, and you can specify to the customer whether they see those pieces you picked out or not. But in the meantime, it's pulling those the inventory just like it is. You didn't really do anything except throw a bow on it, maybe some tissue paper.
Right. So yeah, that's a good call out, because there is a group item, but assemblies, groups only affect inventory when they're used on transactions. Right. So assembly items, you have to build them before you can actually sell them. Now, you can sell an inventory assembly item that hasn't been built, but then you're just like everything else. You could potentially run into a negative quantity on hand, and that will cause
chaos.
Yeah. Mass.
Well, whenever I have books that have to be cleaned up, if they didn't understand the concept of group and they were trying to do group and they did inventory assembly, we usually have a lot of untangling to do. So you don't want to get into this area unless you really are in that manufacturing space where something becomes something new. And then there's that extra step. You have to know that you have to build raw to finished. It's an extra step. And if you skip it, your books are a mess.
Yeah, I have a guy who's actually using online, and he's tracking the manufacturing and in transit process in QuickBooks Online. But it is a bunch.
Manual.
It is a bunch of inventory adjustments. The good news is he has 2 products, so
Right.
so simple inventory, but complicated process because he does it overseas. The manufacturing is done overseas, and then it takes a slow boat from China to to actually get here. So he wants to know where things are during this process, but he uses QuickBooks Online to do that. So there are ways to handle that. It's just a lot of manual adjustments,
Workarounds. Yeah. So I was going to say, an enterprise has what? Landed costs.
Exactly.
If it's important, it's there. So.
Right. So that's what we're going to talk about next week is, how do you handle some of these things where you have inventory in multiple locations, warehouses versus your showroom floor and those types of things. Yeah. And a
drop ship,
mm-hmm.
Amazon.
Yeah. So we'll get really into the functionality of what enterprise can do next week on Workshop Wednesday, and hopefully I won't get kicked out several times or frozen.
Right. We have to diagnose the internet issue.
Yeah. All right. Well, you guys have a great week, and we'll hopefully see you next week.
Should we talk about my new course? You skipped that.
Well, yeah, I got so
he's so scared he's going to disappear.
Right. So Carrie has been hard at work. We lovingly call her COVID Carrie. Because, well, why? Well, why don't you talk about it?
So back in March, and we're almost at 1 year, right? It was, I remember everything about March of last year. It was around St. Patrick's Day, and all of a sudden, everything we knew about the world was different. Dan and I would talk about what was coming, and the next thing we knew, we were all giving our stories about the so-called lockdown, which in our state was sort of a Mickey Mouse lockdown, but it made us all stop and wonder what is going on. And then the political climate got in, and scientists got stuffed down and quieted, and we didn't really get the actual information. So it felt like a fire hose of information. And to this day, people are still confused about, do I wash my groceries? Is it safe? Or, how can I have my birthday party and not, kill grandma? So along the way, I just started just digging in, reading, learning, watching videos, and doing hours of obsessive, crazy COVID Carrie stuff. And in the meantime, I have become, I'm not a doctor. I've become an expert on COVID safety. I have friends call and say, I need to go to so-and-so's funeral. How do I do it so I don't die? And how do I fly from California? And how do I fill in the blank? Can I get my nails done? I just got mine done. I mean, we can still live. And on top of all this, we either work for a business or we are a business owner. And we don't want our businesses to be shut down over COVID. A lot of people have had to pivot. You've had to figure out how to accept touchless payments and how to continue to keep yourself, because without you, where's the business, right? Alive. So my whole course is all about anything you ever want to know about COVID. And as well as we did it in the style of school bookkeeping, I couldn't keep it in 3 minutes every time. So some may be 5, but they're all, it's like Netflix. You just watch what you fill in the blank of what your body was able to absorb this past almost year. I promise there's something in there that you missed along the way because you got COVID weary. We have lots of words around COVID, right?
Yeah. But the genesis of this is that, you found that you were spending hours sharing the same information over and over and
Over
over
and
again.
over and over.
And each of the lessons. So these are free courses, free lessons and free modules, from your friends at School of Bookkeeping.
We want
Right.
everyone to live and recover from this economy, all the problems that COVID has caused the economy. We want everyone. So we've made this a free resource, and it's just we can, once we get it uploaded, it's partially done.
It's currently in process, but we wanted to talk about it today and share the link in the comments of the event here, so that people could take a look at it. And every lesson, what I really like about what your approach to this, every lesson has a link for more information and to verify that information. So unfortunately, there's just a lot of misinformation about this.
I try to combat the misinformation and empower you.
Right. So you can certainly verify and do your own research and everything of that nature. But this is your, I don't know, what do we call it? Like a
mission.
Well, I mean,
obsession, project, special project. It was very distracting. And I feel like now that I've gotten it into lessons, I feel like I can move on to the next thing, because COVID won't be the first thing we're dealing with. We're always going to have some sort of a disaster out there, hurricane, earthquake, fires. We have something that's going to affect our business and potentially our life, our family. And so, we just have to be aware, understand, be knowledgeable, and carry on, right? Carry on.
COVID carry on.
COVID carry on.
All righty. Well, we will see you next week on yet another Workshop Wednesday. And I hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time. Stay safe.